Welcome to our second visit to Minnesota, the North Star State, this time focusing on locations close to the Mississippi River southeast of the twin cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Following the Mississippi along the west bank of the river, filming locations include Minneapolis, St. Paul, Hastings, Red Wing, Maple Springs, Winona and Crescent. Occasionally viewing trains across the river on the eastern bank in Wisconsin. This program also includes a very brief glimpse of operations further south on the west bank at Dubuque in Iowa, to add to your enjoyment. This program begins on the overlook from Mounds Boulevard in St. Paul, with the Mississippi and cityscape as a backdrop. Next, our cameras are positioned either side of the bridge crossing the river to Camden Place in Minneapolis. Maintenance of way at Division Street will continue while trains run through. These Union Pacific light engines are a General Electric AC45 CCTE needing a General Motors electromotive diesel SD70M. A Burlington Northern Santa Fe manifest followed with an Evolution Series 44C4 number 6984 at the head. On the tail is a C44-9W. Powering north with this intermodal are an ES44DC and 2 more Dash 9s. Keep practicing. 4 more Dash 9s are on the head here. Numbers 4029 and 5297 lead in Heritage 2 pumpkin livery. Next, number 703 has been repainted in Heritage 3 swoosh, while the fourth, number 4714, still retains its war bonnet paint scheme. The tail of the train is just rounding the bend in the distance. Light engines arrive to take charge of the grain hoppers. The CP AC44CW will be turned before working the train south. The CSX transportation locos are another AC44CW and an ES44DC. The numbers of these four AC44CWs heading east across the bridge were difficult to read. They are 9592, 8508, 9822 and 9581. There were 115 wagons in this train. We waited nearly 2 hours for a westbound train, which was hauled by two more AC44CWs, numbers 9674 and 9614. Reminders here that this was filmed during the fall. These two trains were filmed only 2 weeks later than the previous scenes from Mounds Boulevard, but besides the persistent rain, the weather had turned decidedly cold. Following the hopper used as a barrier vehicle, there were 110 tank cars in this train. One camera was positioned near the swing bridge across the Mississippi in the Kaposia Landing recreational area, with the other on the footbridge over Park Junction at the north end of South Park Yard. This is the view from that footbridge looking across the park. The bridge is swinging open to allow a barge to pass. The pair of rebuilt GP20C eco-locos on this 60-wagon northbound manifest slowed to a halt while the bridge closed to allow their passage. Altogether, the bridge took about 3 minutes to unlock, swing and lock again from one position to the other. Canadian Pacific GP20C Eco locos were constructed using the frames of older GP9 locos. New, lighter car bodies house the EMD 2000 horsepower V8 710 G3 prime mover, replacing the 16-cylinder 567 with additional exhaust filtering to remove nitrates and particulates. The old generators are replaced by alternators and silicon rectifiers to drive the DC traction motors. With EM2000 computers, the total package achieves a 15% reduction in fuel usage and brings the unit up to Tier 0 Plus emission standards. The new cab meets current crashworthiness requirements. The breakdown of the designator is GP General Purpose, 2 2000 horsepower, 0 Tier 0 Plus, C Crashworthy Cab, Eco fitted with a 710 Eco Prime Mover. Due to their long narrow noses, some railfans refer to them as aardvarks. Note the older style radiator grills on the third of these SD70M locos. they slow to a halt awaiting the flagman's signal that they can cross. We filmed number 5006 previously, crossing another bridge at Logan, New Mexico. The St. Paul Union Pacific Rail Bridge was built in 1910 by the St. Paul Bridge and Terminal Railway. Since then it has been rebuilt 3 times, first in 1925, after flooding in 1951, then again in 1982. Total length of the bridge is about 1,275 feet, or 389 metres. The bridge is being unlocked prior to opening. That was the warning that it was about to move. A pleasure boat is approaching. Once the boat was clear, the bridge closed for a southbound train. The creaking, clanking locking mechanism secures the bridge in the closed position. These were the light engines we saw from Mounds Boulevard earlier, preparing the train. They pass an SD40-2R, number 3356, which has been joined by the pair of light engines we saw at the beginning of the programme. The Kaposia Landing Recreation Area includes an off-leash dog park. This camera is positioned in that area. Several dogs tried to befriend our cameraman, thankfully not during filming. Travelling south from St Paul, the next port of call is Hastings, where the track utilised by Canadian Pacific, Amtrak and the Iowa-Chicago and Eastern Railroad crosses the Mississippi, while the BNSF continues south on the east bank. Our cameras were positioned in several places with views of the bridge and depot. Everything appears to progress at a leisurely rate on the river. You may have noticed barges being propelled along the river in previous scenes in St Paul. At times, it seemed that the river and railway in this region were about equally busy. Now maintained by Canadian Pacific, the Hastings Rail Bridge was built in 1981 by the Milwaukee Road, replacing the original swing bridge that was built in 1871. Total length is about 1,755 feet, 535 metres, with the lifting span allowing a navigation channel just over 300 feet. It takes nearly 2 minutes to raise or to lower the bridge. The northbound Norfolk Southern Manifest passing the depot is headed by an ES44AC paired with a former Conrail C40-8W. This is one of 3 lift bridges that take the railroad across the Mississippi. There is one in downtown St. Paul, but we did not see any trains using it during our time there. The third is in Hannibal, Missouri. However, just to the south of Hastings, in Prescott, Wisconsin, another lift bridge carries the BNSF over the St. Croix River, which empties into the Mississippi. We included trains at Prescott in volume 16 of this series. This train consisted of 118 cars. A pair of Jeep 20C Eco aardvarks are switching the sidings. There was plenty to watch during our long wait between trains. Just upriver from the railroad bridge, Highway 61 has been diverted across a new bridge, which was open to traffic just 4 months before our visit. It replaced the Hastings High Bridge, which had been opened since 1951, and concerns had been raised that it could no longer handle the 40-ton posted capacity and traffic levels exceeding 30,000 vehicles daily. Here, a coordinated pair of thermal lances are being used to dismantle the old bridge, from a cherry picker on the western side and from a cradle hoist suspended by a barge-mounted crane on the near eastern side. As the final cuts to this section of the bridge are made, the other team are lowered to safety clear from the falling molten steel. A second, heavier crane floating on the river takes the weight of the cut section, which it will slowly swing round to place next to it on the barge before being taken further upriver to be lifted onto the bank for further disposal. The 545-foot main span of the replacement bridge, in the background, was constructed off-site, loaded onto barges and floated into position to be lifted onto its support pillars. Total length of the completed bridge is about 1,938 feet. It carries 4 lanes of traffic and a shared use path for pedestrians and cycles. Amtrak's Train 8, Empire Builder, from Portland and Seattle to Chicago, is powered by a Genesis P40 DC and 2 P42 DCs, running over 4 hours behind schedule. An AC44CW leads an ES44AC towards the bridge. The city was incorporated in 1857 and, apparently, the city founders placed suggestions for the name in a hat from which Hastings was drawn. This train had only 65 cars. The aardvarks are taking a rest from switching, so now we are going to take a brief look at Dubuque, Iowa. We had hoped to film trains crossing the Mississippi between here in Iowa and Illinois on the far bank. Unfortunately, the single-track truss bridge was closed, as the swing span was undergoing maintenance by the operator, Canadian National. The William M. Black is a steam-driven, side-wheel dustpan dredge built in 1934, which now serves as a museum. This wide-nosed SD40-2W will be the lead loco on a southbound freight later in the day. The middle loco of 3 will be a rebuilt GP40R, still bearing Illinois Central livery. Since filming, it has been repainted in Canadian national livery. Built for the Detroit, Toledo and Ironton Railroad, the GP40-2 in Grand Trunk Western colours is another that was absorbed by CN. A Dakota, Minnesota and Eastern Railroad grain train heads south. The consolidated operations of DME and the Iowa, Chicago and Eastern Railroads are now a subsidiary of Canadian Pacific, but they retain their blue and yellow livery. Trainhead power is provided by a trio of SD40-2s, with varied histories. The DME loco leading was built for the Milwaukee Road in 1974. The second, with ice markings, was built 2 years later for Missouri Pacific, while the third, DME again, is the youngest of the 3, built for Burlington Northern in 1980. About 30 miles southeast from Hastings lies the picturesque city of Red Wing. Leaving one camera trackside near the Amtrak station, The other climbed the steep slopes to access the stunning vantage points at either end of Barn Bluff, about 400 feet or 120 meters above the Mississippi. The Amtrak station has a clear view of the Mississippi. On this occasion, the Empire Builder bound for Chicago was running about 3 hours behind time. It is powered, as usual, by a pair of Genesis P42 DC locos. Apart from the late running, which appeared to be commonplace bordering on accepted, one thing that seemed noteworthy is the comparatively large number of on-train staff caring for the needs of the passengers. In Britain, it would not be unusual for hundreds of customers to be taken hundreds of miles by no more than a driver, someone called a train manager, and a retail manager who sells tea, coffee and light refreshments from a trolley. Of course, sometimes the trolley service remains at one end of the train because the centre aisle through the train is clogged with standing customers and their luggage. As the sun broke through, the Empire Builder was followed by a pair of Canadian Pacific ES-44 AC locos. Our eagle-eyed photographer spotted a rebuilt SW14 switcher, number 1465, in the Archer Daniels Midland Processing Plant sidings. It was built in 1950 as an SW7 for Illinois Central. Our second camera is now in position at the east end of Barn Bluff. A procession of assorted maintenance of way vehicles trundled through. Our favourite was possibly the Porter Loop. "20 minutes later, a stack train powered north with a pair of AC-44 CW locos at the head. Unless I lost count, there were 266 shipping containers carried on this train. A Gevo paired with an SD40-2 followed the stack train while our caravan on the bluff was making the 20-minute trek to the western end. The city was named after a Sioux chief who was one of a succession of Mdewa-Kamphan Dakota chiefs whose name Red Wing came from their use of a dyed swan's wing as their symbol of rank. Legend has it that he chose neutrality during the War of Independence in 1812 after seeing a vision of the British being driven out. He made peace with the settlers, trading goods, and became the friend of the United States. The modern-day city of Red Wing has grown to a population of about 16,500 and is a favourite destination for tourism and recreation. Views from the west end of Barn Bluff include the city mural and the Amtrak station. Another ES44 AC GEVO on another northbound manifest, this time harnessed with Norfolk Southern C40-8W, number 8376. While filming this train from up on the bluff, our cameraman felt what he thought was a rambler's dog sniffing his leg. It turned out to be this handsome fellow. A BNSF AC44CW leads an SD70 Mac in Burlington Northern Executive livery and an ES44C4 on a unit coal train. The distributed power on the tail, another SC-70 Mac, could just be seen from the western point of the bluff. In increasingly murky lighting conditions, our last scene at Red Wing is a southbound crude oil train hauled by an ES-44AC and an AC-44CW. After the hopper acting as a barrier vehicle, there were 100 tank cars in this train. Travelling southeast from Red Wing, we filmed Riverside near Maple Springs before catching the Empire Builder through Reed's Landing. Further southeast, a camera is beside the bridge that carries the CP track across the Mississippi from the Crescent to La Crosse in Wisconsin. From there, we return northwest via Winona and Stockton to close this programme at the spectacular Mount Charity overlook in the John Latch State Park. This unit coal train is heading south powered by two CSX Transportation ES44AC-H locos. Our second camera is positioned by Dutchman Cooley. Beyond the barges, in the distance across the river in Wisconsin, is the village of Pepin. A BNSF crude oil train has just passed through Pepin, heading south, with an SD-70 Mac leading an SD-70 Ace. Another Mac provides distributed power at the tail. We spent 30 minutes watching the river before the next train came through, northbound grain hoppers with an AC44CW and an ES44AC at the head. The Empire Builder, bound for Chicago, was due through by now. Today it was running only about an hour late, with Genesis locos 197 and 175 at the head. Check out the unusual cars on the tail. In orange and maroon is an ex-Milwaukee Road Hiawatha Skytop lounge car. We believe it is the one owned by the Friends of the 261, named Cedar Rapids. Viewed from Shore Acres Road, the Crescent, this is the first of 4 bridges that carry the railroad east across the Mississippi into La Crosse, Wisconsin. The 359-foot swing span, added in 1902, bridges the 150-foot main navigation channel, followed by 3 trusses onto Minnesota Island. Total length of this bridge is 1,055 feet, about 322 metres. Beyond that, the railroad crosses the Eastern Channel Rail Bridge into Wisconsin, then the French Slough Bridge and the Black River Channel Bridge to arrive in La Crosse. Heading northwest to Winona, there is a CP manifest preparing to depart, powered by a GP40 at the head, a GP38-2 in Sioux livery, and 2 aardvarks. Just north of Winona, an ICE DME manifest was heading west from Minnesota City, bound for Austin. We caught it on County Road 23 and at Stockton. The SD-40-2 Leading, named City of Clinton, was built for Missouri Pacific in 1980. It is paired with a rebuilt SD-40-3 that began life with Canadian Pacific in 1966. High winds did little to spoil the glorious view from Mount Charity Overlook, which is accessed via a half-mile steep climb up 592 steps on the Riverview Trail in the John A. Latch State Park. To the south lies Locken Dam No. 5. There used to be a small logging town here, which was submerged when the dam was built. The BNSF track can be seen in the distance across the river in Wisconsin. A pair of Dash 9s were powering north, with a third loco, in white and green livery, being ferried at the head of the manifest. This was later identified as a rebuilt SD-38-3 No. 573, belonging to Cargill Incorporated. It was built for Louisville and Nashville in 1971. As another barge prepares to enter the lock, 237 shipping containers are carried north by this stack train. Mounts Faith, Hope and Charity, overlooking the river, were named by steamboat captains who used them as landmarks for navigation. The state park was named after John A. Latch, a businessman and patron of conservation from nearby Winona. He purchased some of the property and in 1925, together with an adjacent landowner, donated 350 acres for a state park. Besides the stunning views, the park has become well known for its wildlife. Between trains, we were fortunate enough to film this bald eagle. While taking in the view, a southbound manifest appeared without warning. Note the SD30C Eco locomotives, third and fourth from the head. The SD30, or strictly 30C Eco models, were rebuilt SD40-2 locos. As for the aardvarks we saw earlier, these rebuilds receive new cabs meeting current crashworthiness standards, new car bodies, computers and alternators. The old 645 prime movers are replaced by 12-cylinder 710 G3A units, developing 3,000 horsepower. Altogether, this achieves savings of up to 20% in fuel usage while meeting Tier 0 Plus emission standards. So the breakdown of the designator is special duty, 3,000 horsepower, Tier 0 Plus emissions, crashworthy cab, 710 Eco prime mover. We trust you have enjoyed the range of motive power and spectacular scenery on this journey through Minnesota close to the Mississippi, from Minneapolis to Crescent. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.